I'm delighted to welcome today the very beautiful Syd from the UKVirtualSchools.co.uk. And Syd, you're the founder of this amazing resource. So welcome.
Hi, thank you for having me, Elaine. It's a pleasure to be here.
So you're just changing the look here of the video. Your background, tell us a bit about what led you to create a virtual school and at this time.
So I've been working with the home ed community for around 10 years prior to COVID. So I did a lot of workshops, STEM workshops, science workshops with kids, and I think half of my audience was home educated families. So I did a lot of stuff during the weekday. I did stuff over the weekend for school kids, and I won awards for that. So I've got awards, STEM award for my business and also for my outreach work. And through that period of 10 years, I worked with over 12,000 kids. So there's a lot of work I did, mainly in Birmingham, but also London and Manchester. And I used to love it. We used to do dissection days with the kids, dissect eyeballs and hearts and brains, kids as young as 5. And I think once you get them really interested in something and you build up the knowledge and they get really interested in what they're learning, they love it. They really get into it. And to inspire kids as young as age 5, 6, 7 into something that they could potentially do in the future, and to give them that insight where they can go, oh, I want to become a surgeon when I'm older. It's really, I get a lot of satisfaction from that, and I really enjoy it. And it wasn't just dissections. I'm not a biologist. I'm a physicist. We did a lot of stuff around engineering when I think it was 2019, which marked 60 years since the moon landing, or 50 years, I forget now. We did a huge celebration event. We got some funding to run 12 workshops, and we got engineers involved. So I loved doing that. And it was basically taking a topic and deep diving and not really having a limit to what we could teach the kids. So I could just Google something, and then that would lead to a different question, and then compile activities together, and I'd create workshops. And for like 1 hour of delivery, I'd spend around 10 to 12 hours preparing and researching and doing activities and planning stuff. And I loved it. But then when COVID hit, everything stopped overnight, like literally overnight. I actually stopped 3 weeks before lockdown because I could see it coming. And my last workshop to the kids before COVID was on the 2nd of March. And at that point, it wasn't in my city. Well, so they said it wasn't in the city. But I had a session where the kids were learning about fossil fuels. So they were dressed up as miners. They had their hard hats on with the little lights. And I created a mine under the table, and we'd covered it with a black cloth, and they were in there kind of digging little stones. We'd given them like concrete blocks to kind of dig. And one of the kids found some coal. We had some like coal in these concrete blocks. He found some coal, and he came out of the table and he was licking it. He was only 6. And I told him not to lick it. And then 2 seconds later, he's licking it again. And I'm thinking, we've got an invisible virus floating around. A lot of these kids live in cross-generational households. I can't limit it. I can only do so much, and kids are kids at the end of the day. So I decided to stop there and then, and we shifted to online very briefly, but I quickly found out that online didn't work because of the whole concept of hands-on learning. It just involved a lot of me and my colleague packing things up and delivering to the kids so they could have that online experience, like that hands-on experience, but it wasn't the same. You can't get them to dress up as miners. You can't get them to do dissections. You can't get them to do all the exciting stuff, which was what I was all about. And then so I tested out lots of different things. I did a bit of YouTube videos. I did a couple of online courses, and I quickly realized that trying to make online fit with that business just wasn't going to happen, because that business was all about hands-on learning. And at that point, I was getting a lot of inquiries from families saying, well, you're a teacher, you've got like knowledge in maths and science, can you do some online academic teaching? Because a lot of what I did before wasn't to any curriculum. We had a lot of primary school kids do content which was GCSE and above, and sometimes even degree level. Like I remember one time when we were doing a heart surgery workshop, I had to teach myself how to do suturing. So suturing is basically how they stitch up patients after surgery, and they use a needle which isn't straight. So you're used to using straight needles when you're sewing, but it's curved, so it kind of digs into the skin and comes out the other end. And surgeons don't learn this specialist skill until they specialize. So they're doing their 3-year degree and then they're specializing, so they learn it like at that point. And because we were doing about heart surgery, I thought, oh, it'd be so amazing if we could teach the kids how to do suturing at this age. And so they learned the basic stitches and through using card, and then we used an actual suturing training kit to get them suturing and things like that. So they were learning things that were beyond the curriculum. And then during lockdown, people were asking me to do more academic stuff with them, with their kids. And I kept saying no. And then I realized that actually, I've got all of this knowledge. I'm a qualified teacher. I've worked with the home ed community for 10 years. I know what doesn't work in the school sphere because I've been there. I've worked in private, I've worked in state schools, and I've worked in grammar schools. And there's a consistency in what isn't currently working. And then I've got all this experience of working 12,000 kids. How can I put that together? And then the idea dawned on me at the end of May 2020. I had this idea. I was like, maybe if I run group sessions on academic subjects, I can do the science and maths to start off with, but this isn't where I don't see myself doing all the teaching because I get bored of curriculum-based content. I feel like it's very constrained. So I thought, okay, maybe I could get a group of teachers in then. And I'm sure there's teachers that also feel the same way about the education system as I do, that would love something a bit different, that makes sense, that's not all about the admin, that doesn't actually make any difference to the kids. Because I remember writing reports, and I just like every teacher would do this, they'd copy and paste because we have to submit 150 reports. You can't write unique reports for every kid. It just isn't possible. So things like that, I was like, oh, we don't have to be doing reporting, we don't have to be marking homework, we don't have to do all the things that don't really make a difference. So I had this idea. I trialed it out in June with 15 families, and those 15 families were families that I knew. I just did a call out on Facebook. We had 100 respond, and I picked 15 to work with, and we trialed it out for a month, and then we took their feedback. And the feedback that I got from the families was very, very positive. Like, they'd had other sessions online and things weren't working. And they were very surprised that we weren't just working through worksheets online. I'm like, well, working through worksheets isn't really teaching. And I didn't think we were doing anything that amazing at that point because I was still learning how to use Zoom. And then we fully launched in July 2020. And it was kind of a soft launch because we were doing like Head Start courses and revision courses because kids had missed a lot. And then we officially launched in September 2020. So it's been a year since we've been running. And in that year, it's been a roller coaster because within the first 6 months, I managed to have 18 staff. Wow. So that was it was a big learning experience for me too, because I'd never managed such a big team before. And employing people and just managing people takes so much time and energy, and making sure everything's ticking properly. And then we finished our first academic year in July. And then now we've just started our second year. And it's coming together and it's really exciting. And we've started to implement a lot of the things I wanted to. So I had this vision of where I wanted it to go. And last year was just about getting the basics in. So we started off with English and maths and science for the older kids. And then we started this year, we've now introduced art and languages and a brand new subject, which I've called worldviews. And one kind of thing I have an issue with our current education system is that especially things like history and RS, I find they're very much from a British lens, which is kind of restricting in a lot of ways. Even science, when they look at scientists, they only look at European, white, middle-class scientists. And I think there's so much more out there. And I do feel that if the kids were introduced to all of these amazing inventions and discoveries and historical developments from all over the world at a young age, they would see people differently. They'd see immigrants differently. They'd see other people of different colors and nationalities and races differently. They'd welcome them because they know that they've contributed to what we have in the UK. And everything it works both ways. Like, we've contributed to their lives and they've contributed to ours. And if we saw things through that lens, I think we would have a very, very different society, and people would perceive people differently. So worldviews was a first attempt at trying to get a different viewpoint. And the way that it runs is we look at history, geography, RS, cultural studies, but from the lens of one particular country per month. So September, the kids looked at South Africa. And the younger kids looked at like all like the food, the culture, the languages, and just some of the amazing art as well. They're doing South African art. And then the older kids also looked at apartheid, Nelson Mandela, and they looked at more of the heavier topics. And this month they're exploring Egypt. So they're just going to be working through 10 different countries over the year. And these are countries that the kids have picked. And we did a Facebook poll and they picked the top 10 that they wanted to explore. So that's where we are at the moment. And that's where kind of it started off, and kind of where my passion is. My passion is in disrupting the current education system and demonstrating that there's another way to do things. It doesn't have to be done a certain way. And I was also a governor of a local primary school. And during COVID, I just found that there were just so many excuses of, we can't do online, no one's going to engage. I was like, well, have you tried? We can't do online because the kids won't be able to be interactive, or the people don't have internet. And I'm like, you're just coming up with excuses. No one's tried anything here. And I found that there was so much disparity between different schools, and the amount of education that kids were receiving changed. Like, some kids were just getting worksheets. Some kids were getting recorded videos, some kids were getting lives, some kids were getting nothing. And there was just so much variance. And I'm thinking, why isn't everyone in the 21st century? I wasn't online prior to COVID, but I've had to learn, and I'm sure people can learn. And I think this is the other thing. A lot of adults feel like they've done all their learning. They feel like once they've gone through their degree, they've specialized in an area, that's it. They've done all their learning and everything's going to be just great. And I think we need to come with the perception and the approach that learning never stops. And if we do stop learning and challenging ourselves, then we have an issue. Like, we need to continually be learning. So the idea of working online is just a new challenge. Like, just embrace it and take it where you can take it. But you're not gonna be able to learn anything if you kind of come up with excuses and don't give things a shot. So part of me was demonstrating how we can actually utilize online teaching and that it can work, and we've demonstrated it does work. We've got loads of testimonials from parents last year where they've gone, even traditional school, like they've gone, my kid wasn't excelling as much, and wow, they're doing so much better now, and they love learning. And I've started a podcast for UK Virtual School, and we had a girl come on, Hope, and she's only 8, and she talked about how she didn't like English before she came to UK Virtual School. She went to a traditional school, and then she started online schooling when COVID hit, and I'm pretty sure they were planning to go back, but then she loves it so much now, and she loves English now. She goes, I love English, the teachers are amazing. And she was telling me how she's writing a book which is 1,568 pages long. And I was like, wow, that's a bit long. Once you've got it published, let me know, because I'll promote it for you. And this is what we want to do. We want to develop kids that love learning for the sake of learning, not because they're going to get a sticker, not because they're going to get points, but because they're just going to get the satisfaction of they've learned something. And it's just reviving that wonder, which I did with my STEM workshops, but now kind of applying it to all the subjects and training up the teachers to kind of take a different approach. And it's a big learning curve for the teachers. I'm not going to lie and say it's easy for them either. A lot of them have never taught online. So they're coming from teaching in a classroom, having a certain perception of how teaching should be, and then learning how to adapt to online, learning how we do things at UK Virtual School. But they all love it. They all love it. And it gives them the flexibility of just doing whatever they want to do during the day and then just tuning in when they need to teach. And like Hannah lives in a van. She travels from country to country in a van, and she teaches, and she sets up a laptop, and she's got lovely backdrops of the Swiss Alp mountains or wherever she is. And we've got teachers all over the world, and being online means I can hire the best teachers that are out there, rather than being constrained to a certain location. Like when you're in a certain school, you're not just like restricted to a certain region, but also then the teachers have to commute, then you're restricted even further. And then if they want to work in that particular school, then you're restricted even further. But when you're online, you've basically got the entire world at your fingertips. And so a lot of parents are really impressed with the level of the teachers, and I'm really happy of the caliber that we have. And I know we're a startup yet, and there's a long way to go, so we're building up slowly. But that kind of gives you a little overview, and I've talked a lot, so I'm going to stop there so you can ask me questions. I'm really passionate about what I do.
Wow, and that is the key, Syd. Passion is the thing that's missing with a lot of businesses, with a lot of enterprises, and being passionate and leading by example is exactly what we've kind of lost it. People have lost their mojo. I've in the work that I've done over 25 years with this behavioural profiling, I used to go into schools and teach. I used to mentor head teachers. I used to teach senior management teams how to understand each other and work together. I used to help. I trained the teachers to understand about the different behaviours and how to nurture and encourage those behaviours, rather than the teacher stamping their personality on the class and expect it all to go swimmingly well. So I've got an insight into, and I used to mentor, I think it was, I can't remember, it was 5 or 7 secondary schools over in Essex through a particular scheme that I volunteered with for a number of years. So I've got an insight into what does work and what doesn't work. But I'm in my 60s now, and my education was completely different to how young people's education is today. So I'm out of touch, but I'm so inspired by the way that you grasp this. And I love the way you say disrupting. You certainly are disrupting, but it's the way forward, isn't it? Online and a mixture of online and practical. So how do your teachers cope now and manage with the inability to do the cutting, sewing, all the rest of it? Or do they do it and show them, and then people, is it happening on the screens at home all over the world? How does that work?
It definitely is happening on the screen. So for example, in Worldviews, they were making what are they called? Rain sticks.
Oh, yeah.
And so you told them what they needed to get beforehand, and then they were following the instructions live and showing what they'd made, and things which don't allow the teachers to do, like more recently they for South Africa they were also making milk tarts, and with that it wasn't done live, but the teacher gave them instructions, and then they sent in photos, and then they shared them during the next lesson. And things like science, Hannah does a lot of the things with them still. She gets them to, and a lot of science can be done with items around the house. So she will get them to gather a few things before, she'll let them know what to get, and then they'll do things together. So I know they've done like acid and alkali experiments with red cabbage, and they created their own indicator. She's done live dissections with them so they can see things and ask questions. And so a lot of the demo stuff is still possible. We are restricted in some ways because we can't have the expensive equipment, but there's always videos and simulations that we can use in class. And I think technology is the way forward. So I don't think it's a restriction. It's just another tool, another way to learn. And I always say to the kids and the parents that online learning it should not be the only thing your kids are doing. We can cover the academics, but they also need to be going out there and meeting people and doing other things. So like Hope talks about how she does the English and the maths and the science with us, but then outside of those hours, she's going horse riding. She's she's doing volunteering work at a local farm, because she wants to become a vet. So she's got all these interests. She goes and does other things, I think swimming and gymnastics and things like that. So you always have to combine it and blend it with other things. And the home ed community in the UK is growing, and it's grown even more since COVID. So before COVID, it was estimated we had around 100k families that were home educated, and there were pockets of them all around the UK. And they arrange their own group trips and things so the kids can socialize. And this is a one worry that a lot of families have. They're like, well, how do kids socialize if they're not in a classroom, right? How do they build those socialization skills? And what I found working with home editors over the last 10 years is that home educated kids are so much more well-rounded and well-spoken, because they tend to be working with a wide range of ages. In a school, you're restricted to your peers, right? You're all the same age. So you tend to talk in a certain way. You tend to kind of learn speech and learn communication skills on that level. But when you're home educated, you're working with a lot of adults. You're working with a lot of different ages. And then so you learn skills which I think are a lot more valuable, because it allows you to speak to a wide variety of people. So I don't find that home educated kids are restricted in that way at all. They're actually a lot more rounded. And I think during COVID, because everyone was isolated and they were like, oh, how do home educated kids, I like, what, this is not what home education is about. Like, this is not normal. Like, normally kids are out and about, they'll go to the park, they'll go to museums and trips with their families, they'll meet up with other kids, they'll meet up with families, right? And home education or homeschooling during COVID was not typical home education. And I think more and more people are starting to realize that. And we had at UK Virtual School, we had a huge influx of families in the first week of September, where they went back. So kids went back to mainstream school for a couple of days, and they realized, I don't want this now, because they've had that experience at home and they've realized that I don't like this. And they've gone to their parents and they've said, can you find a different way? Because I don't want to go to school. I don't want to go to a physical school anymore. And so we had a lot of families sign up last minute with us, and they're loving it. They're loving the small classes. And I think this is where the difference is as well. School feels almost forced. Kids are like, they're restricted to go from 9 till 3. They're told to behave a certain way. And in the 21st century, things are different now. Like, the motivation needs to come from the kids. It needs to come from the kids, because you can't force a kid to learn if they don't want to learn. It has to come from them. And when kids are opting to do online, when they're saying, I don't want to go to school, but I'll do online, when they're opting to be in a class, we take a maximum of 10 kids. We get kids that are all coming together focused, and there's no behavioral problems. We have the odd one, they're kids after all, right? But on the whole, they're focused, they want to learn, they're asking questions, they're engaging. And that time that they spend with the teacher, because we don't do 9 till 3, but that time that they spend with the teacher, because they know it's restricted, they've only got this much time, they're very focused. And then they know they can go and play video games, they can do other stuff, they can go and read a book, they can go for a walk, right? And also it empowers the kids. They don't need to ask permission to go to the loo. Like, I find that really strange that kids need to ask permission to go to the toilet, right? They can just in chat say, I'm off to the toilet, I'll be back in a couple of minutes. And the teacher knows why they switched off their camera and they've gone, right? They can go and grab a glass of water. They can go and grab a snack. Like, it's so much more conducive when a child can kind of be more empowered to just own themselves and say, I need to grab a snack because I'm hungry, I can't focus, I need to grab a bottle of water. They don't need to ask a teacher for permission. And I think that's what's going to create adults that know how they work, that know that this is the way that I work, this is the way that I function, this is what I need to be motivated. And this year we've also introduced coaching tutorials, and this was one thing that I really wanted to put into play when I set up UK Virtual School, to kind of create a holistic approach to learning, not just the academics. So this year we've introduced coaching tutorials, which is they will watch a video that our teachers have created. So this month it was about growth mindset, which I am a big fan of. And so we have 4 core values at UK Virtual School. And I don't know whether you've looked at our website, Elaine, but if you haven't, you need to have a look, because they're just embedded everywhere. So, and we've created characters of them. So growth mindset is one. Then we have innovation. we have curiosity, and then like the two twins, we call them one because they're kind of linked, is diversity and inclusion. So I'm very, very big on these 4 core values, and growth mindset is a big one for us. So our first kind of coaching tutorial was on this. So the kids watched the video. It's on YouTube. Anyone can access it. If they just go to UK Virtual School and they find the video on growth mindset, it's a 20-minute video, and it talks, it's Hannah's that's doing this. So Hannah's our science teacher, and she talks about how she as an adult has had to use growth mindset because she's learning how to, I think it's skydive, no, something, gliding, it's gliding, right, with the thing. So she's learning how to glide, and she's learned how like little mistakes can have like disastrous consequences. Like she landed somewhere where she wasn't meant to land, and she got nettles all over her. So she's having to apply her growth mindset and kind of go, right, I haven't failed, I've just learned what not to do now, and I can pick myself up and do it again. So the kids watch that, they work through a worksheet which is available on our website. And then our students will then have a session, a group session, like a coaching session with a tutor, where they will talk about their kind of growth mindset or their fixed mindset and kind of work towards that. And I think that's going to be very powerful as well. And over the next 10 months, we're going to go through different things. So they look at communication skills, they look at how to organize themselves, how to revise, how to verify information they find online, things which are going to be lifelong skills, which I am a big believer that kids need to learn at a young age. Because I found out as an adult, I went to a public speaking course, and I learned all these skills, and suddenly I felt so empowered, and I was like, wow, had I learned this when I was a kid, I would have understood like how my voice works. And because I remember when I became a teacher, I was very high pitched when I was younger, and even in my early 20s. And when I became a teacher, they would say project. They're like, you got to project your voice if you're going to be able to reach the end, the edge of the class, right? And me projecting meant that I just shrieked because I didn't know how to project. And on this public speaking course, by this point, I'd learned how to project, but I learned it just out of just like coincidence. But at this public speaking course, they taught the 2 different voice types, like how you get like a chest voice, which is a lot deeper, and that allows you to project further, and how you have like a head voice, which is more high pitched, which is what females tend to use. And I was like, had I been taught this and being able to interchange between the 2, it would have made so much more sense, right? So these are the skills which I think kids really need to know at a young age, because they're lifelong skills. We're always going to have to present, whether it's at a board meeting, whether it's a group of people. We're always going to have to communicate. We're always going to have to use growth mindset. We're always going to have to be organized and verify information that we find online. So these are skills that are long term. So yeah, I'm very excited in implementing this and seeing where we go. And I've got big plans for UK Virtual School, like really big plans.
I can feel your energy, Syd. I mean, it's absolutely, you are infectious. You're extremely inspiring, and everything that you've said, I totally resonate with. And that's why I specialise in the DISC model of behavioural profiling, because if we understand our behaviours early on, and I've taught kids as young as 5. I'm not a teacher by any means. I have been a trainer, but I've done all kinds of things in the past, all of which have needed the core values and skills and everything that you've been talking about. So I'm totally with you. The earlier we learn all of this stuff, the better human being we can become, the better we can contribute to life, the better we're going to get on with people, the happier we're going to be, the healthier we're going to be. You know, there's just so many knock-on effects. Do you have classes in age groups? I mean, how do you segregate the classes? Because presumably a 5-year-old and a 15-year-old would need a different approach.
When I did my science workshop, so before COVID, I would do classes from 5 to 14, and they'd all be in the same class. And that took me a long time, 10 years. I think it was the 9th year that I started doing that. That took me a long time to develop the skill to be able to do that effectively. And some people will say, oh, that's not possible. It is completely possible. It just takes a lot of learning, a lot of trial and error, a lot of kind of implementing activities. And the reason why I did that, and there was a specific reason, like I never do anything without there being a specific reason. The reason why I did that was when kids of the same age are in the same class, they tend to compete because they feel they're at the same starting point. And they're not. They're still not at the same starting point, but they feel that they are because they know that we're all the same age. Now, if you put groups of kids together where they all are different ages, and it's visibly easy for them to recognize, actually, there's a 5-year-old, there's a 14-year-old, like there's a wide range of ages here, something changes in the way that they think. Suddenly, it's not about competition, it's about collaboration. And I think that skill is so important. And the way that the workshops were constructed, and this is very difficult to do online, so I'll talk about how we've done it at UK Virtual School, but how I did it in the workshops, and it was much easier because kids would naturally gravitate towards a personality type that they matched, even though the age groups were different. So I'll talk about the heart dissection day, because I remember that quite vividly, and even though it was like 2 years ago, you can't forget that because it was just gruesome as well at the same time. But it was done over 2 days, and like the first day they were learning about the heart and everything, and the second day is when they did the dissection and they learned about careers. So the first day, when they were learning about the heart and they were learning about the suturing techniques, we introduced the activity to everyone. So it's the same content that's delivered to everyone, but the activities were done in a way where the kids would naturally segregate and they would be able to work on different things. So we'd show them the different stitches, and there were 5 or 6 different stitches. And then the younger ones would say, guys, you guys need to start on this one. And the older ones would start on also the same, but they'd quickly work their way up. And what we'd find is also, we don't have this policy that you have to be sat in your seats. Like once they start, they can move around. We have normally 1 or 2 activities going on at the same time. So they were doing the suturing. Well, I say suturing. It was basically sewing 2 pieces of card together with holes in to practice first, and then there was the actual suturing with the curved needle, because they needed to learn the stitch before they could do it with the curved needle. So we had 2 activities happening at the same time, and what we found was the kids naturally gravitated towards another kid that could support them. So like the younger kid would like naturally go and sit next to and say, can you help me with this bit here? And then you'd have the 2 kids kind of helping and supporting each other, and vice versa. Like sometimes we also find like the older kids have got much better dexterity skills, so they can help with holding things and helping them to do things. The younger kids are far more creative. So when you do a creative project, like when we do, like, we're going to build something, guys, can you come up with a design that will solve this problem? The younger kids come up with these amazing ideas. And then and it kind of opens up the creative mind in the older kids as well. So it's not just the older helping the younger all the time. It works both ways. And quickly the kids realize that every child has a strength, and it becomes a collaborative project rather than them trying to compete and finish. Because we say to them, until everyone's finished, we haven't finished the project. So if you're completed early, you need to go and help someone else out. So they naturally then will go and find someone to support. And it's such a lovely way, because if you're teaching someone else, you're learning a skill as well. Because there's something else, and if they haven't understood it the first way, the way that we've approached it, we'd say to the kid, okay, you've done your bit, so can you show a different approach to the other kid? And it's a really nice way to learn. Now online, that's a bit harder, because the kids are not together. They're on their own on a computer in different parts of the world potentially. And in some classes we do have like 4 kids from 4 different continents, and it's amazing that they have that, because I'm like, it's raining here, and then someone else is like, it's dark here, it's in the middle of the night. So it's amazing that online gives that ability. But what we do have, and this is something that I felt really strongly about, because before COVID, I also worked for a charity which was linked to the LEA, my local authority. And I went into schools and I supported kids that had fallen behind. And I remember this one kid that I worked with one-to-one. He was in year 6, but he was working at year 2 level. He just coasted through 4 years of his life without actually learning anything, because he must have struggled with something at year 2, but it was never reinforced, and he got left behind. And I'm very much of the kind of stance that the kids need to get the foundations before they move on. So what we do at UK Virtual School is we match them to ability groups rather than age. So in year 5, we still call it year 5 because we're following the curriculum. But in year 5, we could have a kid that's technically should be in year 3, but is working at a higher level. We could have a kid that should be in year 8, but hasn't yet got the basics and they're put in year 5. And because we're online, the kids can't really tell that the ages are very different. They're all just focused on the learning. And we have this because I feel that they need to get the basics in place. And then once they've got that in place, and then we can shift them up a year, or we can shift them up 2 years. And also we skip year 8 completely. We skip year 8 completely, we skip year 9. And the reason for that is because I find that year 7, 8, and 9, I was a secondary school teacher, I find that they're very repetitive. Year 7's needed because they need to learn the skills. There's a big leap from year 6 to year 7 in terms of independent learning skills, the amount of work that they're doing. They suddenly have 3 sciences that they have to learn. So I think year 7's needed to develop that foundation, and gives them kind of a year to not get it right, but learn from that experience. And then we skip year 8 and year 9 content, and we start straight into GCSEs. So year 7, and then they start onto a 3-year GCSE course. So year 9, 10, 11 is a 3-year GCSE course. So if we've put a child a year behind in primary school, for example, they can still catch up, right? Because we still skip a year. Even if they're 2 years behind, they'll still be able to catch up, because sometimes we can skip year 7 if they're doing really well and put them in year 9. Or sometimes there's ways of getting them to catch up. And sometimes our kids are going to be doing the GCSEs over a couple of years staggered. So there's different ways, and the end point can be reached. Like, every child can reach GCSE. Sometimes it's going to take them a little bit longer, and we just have to realize that they're just going to take a little bit longer, and that's completely fine. And just being a year or 2 behind isn't going to make that much of a difference later on in life. But having those foundations in place is going to make a heck of a lot of difference to their results. So it's also changing mindsets and getting parents to realize that actually it's fine if your child is a year behind. It's fine if your child is a year ahead, as long as they're being challenged and they're in the appropriate year group for them. And that's the important thing, treating them as an individual rather than going, oh, on average, everyone should be at this point. No, that's not how it works. Kids develop skills at different rates. Like, I remember I struggled with writing essays. I used to hate English. I could not, I was amazing at maths and science, but English was just not my topic. It was not my subject. And the only reason I managed to get a good GCSE result was back then we had coursework. And my teacher got me to redo the coursework, I think 5 or 6 times, until she was satisfied. Right? And because I got like an E the first time, and then got a D, and then she kept like, you need to do it again. You need to do it again. And we don't have that ability anymore, because a lot of the GCSEs are not coursework now. They're all examination. So it's important that the kids have the skill, because I don't think I developed my essay writing skills until I got to university level, until I was doing my teacher training and I had to write essays. Then it all clicked into place. But it took me a while to get to that. So it's fine for the kids to be learning at their own pace, as long as they're appropriately challenged. So every kid at UK Virtual School is legally home educated. And when they're home educated, the law says that the child has to be learning education appropriate to their level, whatever that is. So if you're an SEN kid, that's going to be different. If you have got anxiety, if you've got other things that are kind of taking your focal away from the education, then you're going to be slower at learning that stuff, because your mind is not yet engaged. You need to solve those issues before you can learn, right? And I find a lot of kids that come to us have come with a variety of other issues. And it's a shame that kids are feeling these anxiety at such a young age these days, because they're feeling the pressure, they're feeling the exam pressure, they're feeling the pressure to behave a certain way in school. So we've got a lot of kids that have got high anxiety, they've been bullied, they've got SEN needs. And this is where our core value of diversity and inclusion comes in. Like, we welcome every child, because education is for every single child. And it pains me so much where SEN kids are seen as like an add-on in school. Like they cater to the main average child, neurotypical child, and then the neurodiverse kids are seen as an add-on, and then they'll do something different for them. And that's not how it should be. And I say to our teachers, and you're talking about behaviors, if something's not clicking with a kid, then the adult needs to change the way that they're doing things. Because we're the adult. We can't expect the child to change. They're just a kid. We need to learn how they're working. And so I say to the teachers that when we have a new kid attending, the whole dynamics of the class is going to change.
Yeah.
And that's good, because it's showing that they're bringing in their personality and their character and their unique stuff. If the dynamics isn't changing, then we need to bring that child out of their shell, because they don't feel safe yet to be themselves. Because every child has a unique personality, and we love it. We love, like, I do an assembly. So we had our first assembly of this year and last Monday, and it's for all our kids to attend, and we have all the kids from different age groups attend, and they're all welcome to share their feedback. So we go around and they all share their feedback of how their first month has been. And then we do some feedback where it's not possible for them to see who's sending. So it's like some written feedback, and they can all kind of see. And it's very important to have every child's voice heard. And sometimes kids don't want to be vocal. So we've got chat on Zoom that they can put their comments in. If they don't want the other kids to see, they can send it privately to the teacher. So there's I think online offers multiple tools for kids that have a variety of different needs to engage. Like, they can engage in a way that suits them. And I think that's really important. Like, in a classroom, we expect the child to make eye contact. We expect a child to speak to us directly. We expect the child to put a hand up. But what if a child is shy? What if a child feels like they can't do that? What if a child's being bullied and they're going to get bullied if they put their hand up? Like, all of these factors come into play. And for a kid, that is their entire world. Like, that's all that they see. So I think online gives them a lot of that safety as well. They're at home. They're in a place where they feel safe. They're in a place where they can, we have a rule where we say cameras need to be switched on, but there's always exceptions to rules, right? So if we know that a child is suffering from anxiety, we will tell the teachers that it's okay if they turn their camera off, if they need time out for a little while. If they've got if they're on the spectrum, for example, things can become overwhelming. They might want to just walk away from the screen, and that's completely fine. And it's about, I think sometimes we lose the human touch, and this is in every business. Like, the other day I lost my glasses. I was wearing my sunglasses. My glasses fell out of my bag, and I didn't realize, but my car drove over them. And I didn't find them until a week later, crushed on my, weirdly enough, the frame was crushed, but my lens was completely fine. No scratches on the lens. I don't know how that happened. So I called up my optician, and I was like, can you give me my prescription so I can get a new pair of glasses made, because at the moment I'm wearing my old ones and it's giving me a headache. And they were like, no, we can't, because it's been 2 years since you've had your eyes tested, so we're not allowed to give you a prescription. I was like, oh. It's like they're reading something off a script, right? I called up another company I found online, and I spoke to them, and I said, I've crushed my glasses, the lens is still available, I don't have my prescription, can I send my lens in for you to kind of, do you have the machines to kind of test the lens and get, and he was like, yeah, just send them in, put my name at the top, I will get them measured, I'll do it myself, and then I'll give you a call, put your number in the letter with it, and I will give you a call. And even if you don't want to go with us, like, you can just take the prescription and take it somewhere else if you like. Just that human conversation. And I was like, it's been a while since I've had just someone talk to me like a human, right? Yeah. Just like understand the situation, provide a solution, and not just read off a piece of paper, but just make it so personal. And I really appreciated that. Like, I really appreciated it. And it's the same with kids. They don't want to feel like they're just a number. And this is why we don't do reports. This is why we don't do homework marking, because then it just becomes a number. It just becomes like an 8 out of a 10 on a piece of homework, right? We don't want to do that. They do homework and they bring it into class and they have a discussion. They're like, oh, I've got 5 for this particular question, and they'll put all their answers in, and the teacher will say, well, how did you get that? Does everyone else agree with that? So it's about understanding the concept rather than just getting to the end answer. And I think when you put that human touch back in, whatever it is, whatever business you're in, whatever industry you're in, it's going to have a huge impact in how the other person engages with you. And I think it's so, so, so important. And I think that's what we're missing. Like everything seems to be automated. You go, even before COVID, when you went to like a library or anything like that, everything was like automated. You didn't even have to speak to someone to take a book out. And I would deliberately just go to the counter and say, I want to have a conversation. Like, how's your day been? Because we're losing that human touch. Like everything's online now and everything's on social media. And I still think even if you're doing Zoom conversations, just have a chat with someone and engage with them. And I think that's what's really missing from society, that connection point. And very, very big on making our online school feel like a community. So this is why we have a community day. We have an assembly on that day. We have a parent meeting on that day. And even the parents are welcome to offer suggestions. And I say to them, we don't have everything sorted. Like, I don't have all the answers, but this is as much as your school as it is mine. This is as much as yours as it is the kids. And all of you have to work together into making it better. And that's only going to happen if you tell us how we can improve further. And the ideas that they suggest, we implement, we test them out, and we get their feedback. And this is what it's about. And I think this is where some schools have it wrong, where they distance themselves from their parents and they say, well, we know better and we want to do this. And I don't think that's the right way. And in the same way, I don't think it's the right way to just say, oh, that's the parents' job to deal with this. I think it needs to be a joint effort, and it needs to include the kids in that conversation.
Yeah, absolutely right. And you've used the words that I often use, which is challenge and collaboration. And as you said, competition used to be the way forward, but it's collaboration, no question. I do apologise, I'm struggling here. I'm twitching every now and then. I've got a fly that keeps on coming round me. Do you have any lessons on how to deal with flies in a compassionate way? Dear me.
Is it a fly or is it fruit flies? Because I had a fruit fly infestation in my kitchen just last week, right? And I don't even know what was attracting them because I didn't have any food out. I couldn't get rid of them, and they were stuck all over the walls and all over the fridge. I don't know what's going on. And it wasn't just me, like my colleague was also suffering with this. So are they fruit flies or are they normal flies?
It's just one normal fly. And I've tried walking out the door because it seems to be going around me. I thought, right, okay, I'll go out the door and it will follow me, but it didn't. So I've got to deal with that in a moment. I'm speaking at a conference this evening, a very big conference. So I need to make sure that the flies out of the way. One question: do you deal with music? Do you have a music teacher? How do you deal with that or not?
We don't at the moment. So there's subjects that we haven't introduced yet, and we're hoping to introduce at some point in the future. So we've got no music. There's other stuff like geography we don't do as a single subject at the moment. It's part of worldviews. There's loads of subjects we don't currently do. But it is something that people have requested, and it is something we're going to look into in the future, hopefully.
I've got the very person to introduce to you. I'll speak offline about that. Yeah, wonderful. So we could talk all day and all night, no doubt, because it's such a wonderful experience to talk with you, to hear you speak about your passion, your ideas, where you've come so quickly, so fast, and you're doing it in a very structured, ordered, sensible way. So as you say, you are a startup, but it's very dynamic what you're doing. And I think a key thing which a lot of organisations overlook is values and sticking to your core values. A lot of people tend to get lost along the way, but if you stick to your values, you're passionate about what you do, then the world's your oyster, and you're doing amazing, Syd. I take my hat off to you. I'm very impressed.
Thank you. And I think this is why we wanted to create characters of the values, because I think it really defines them and puts them into perspective for the kids and for the teachers and for the staff. And it might look like we're grown very fast, but you have to also understand that I've got 10 years of experience in the industry. So people think like, oh, it's grown so fast, so quickly, but I've utilized all of that experience that I had, and I've learned from that. And I think that's where, when you see something grow very quickly, it's often come from years and years of learning and trialing and getting it wrong beforehand.
Exactly. The same has happened to me with health. My 25 years plus experience of all kinds of things are now culminating into what I currently do with health mentoring. So onward and upward. And how can people get hold of you, Syd? Where do they find details?
I'm all over social media. If you search for ukvirtualschool.co.uk, or just go and search for UK Virtual School on Facebook or Instagram. And we're also on YouTube as well. So ukvirtualschool.com or .co.uk, either one.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Syd, and keep up the good work. You're fabulous.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for having me, Elaine.